Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the show. We're going to be diving into the latest AI news to keep you up to speed on what's happening and the latest events in AI and tech in broader sort of conversations as well. So, yeah, Will, what's the latest story with that sort of, grabbed your attention, shall we say?
Well, I think this is going to be an interesting one to talk about because it's got a little bit of history to it now. And it's fascinating on many levels, and I like that. So this is China playing the reverse card on the US recently, saying that they don't want, or they're instructing domestic tech companies within China not to buy Nvidia chips for AI. And this is fascinating because you go back a little bit. I can't remember how long ago this was. Maybe I want to say like last year, 18 months ago, but basically, if you remember, Ben, the US put huge sanctions and restrictions on exporting advanced chips to China.
Yep. Yeah,
and
I do remember.
This began under Biden, and they basically stopped exporting all of these chips, primarily Nvidia chips, because those are sort of the world's leaders at this, to China, to slow down their military capabilities, their AI development, and generally just do that. And in return, Nvidia worked on a chip, which is what this article talks about, is the fact that they have the new RTX Pro 6000D chip, and that is specifically designed to comply with the market for China. And China have just gone around and gone, no, don't want it. And instead, companies like Alibaba and ByteDance, who own TikTok, they've all been told not to buy chips from Nvidia, and this has incurred huge onward problems, huge contagion. For example, as we scroll through this article, Nvidia is reporting an $8 billion revenue loss for the second quarter alone by not being able to sell chips to China, and that's not a revenue loss overall. That's just $8 billion lost out of their total revenue. So they're still highly profitable, but yeah, a big old loss. And yeah, it's just really interesting what started off as a sanction and a restriction to China, and this time they've spent domestically improving their capabilities, in the country, so that they don't need the US. And it is fascinating because we've spoken on this podcast for the last couple of weeks, and we quite often mention Chinese models being highly competitive now. So yeah, what is your thoughts when you hear this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to take away, isn't there? I think one thing that jumps out to me is I wonder if it's a bit of tick for tat in terms of like the trade war that's happening at the moment, and all the different sort of sanctions that Trump's putting on different countries. I wonder if there's a little bit of gamemanship, but equally, I wonder actually if, like you said, China doesn't, no longer needs that technology. We've seen the past where China goes, you know what, we're going to just build our own, manufacturing bases. We're going to build our own IP. First of all, what do? They copy everything from everyone else, steal that IP, and then start building out their own sort of, solutions, infrastructure, technologies, and all the rest of it. So I suspect it's probably a combination of both. The question is whether they would whether they would at some point allow Nvidia to sell their chips again. Maybe they won't. I mean, that's the thing. It's definitely a situation. And we can see it playing out in geopolitics. Like China is just building up their capability internally. And wanting to become less reliant on the West. So, what does that mean for the future? What does that mean, for us? Probably nothing immediately. But again, it's just another, it's a power struggle that we see playing out in a geopolitical sort of sense. So, yeah, it's a fascinating, state of the world, really. We've got these two big powerhouses, the United States and China, competing on many levels. And AI is the frontier of technology. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. What do you think it's going to put China back in any way? Do you think it's actually going to hamstring them in the short term? Because I think China's always been about long-term play. They're not thinking about these 5-year, 4-year electoral cycles that the West have to unfortunately fall into, and the politicians tend to sort of look very sort of short-termism. China look at 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years in terms of their sort of, their planning, which gives them a huge strategic advantage. They can take that short-term pain now for a longer-term benefit. So I don't know. Do you think? How do you see there's going to be a short-term pain that they may experience?
Initially, when the Biden administration started these restrictions on China to begin with, everyone would be like, yes, because Nvidia is such a world leader in these chips and GPUs and the semiconductor technology that is being used within training for AI, that not letting a company have access to this technology, or a country not have access to this technology, was considered, a big blow. But it's amazing that actually China has done amazingly. And I'm not going to sit and pretend to be a China fanboy. I'm sort of indifferent between the US and China, to be honest with you, as I think most people are generally. But they've done amazingly well in the AI race to keep up. Go back last year, they released DeepSeek, which took the world by storm, being a hugely competitive model, if not better than for other frontier models, but built for a fraction of the price. And then, since then, we've seen a lot of Chinese companies like Moonshot AI, like Alibaba with their Quen model, with, there's a bunch of very, very competitive models which sit up amongst the best in the world, unquestionably. And they've done all of this with all these restrictions in place. So I actually don't think that it's going to slow them down at all. I think this is a sign of strength with China, because again, in this article they tout that they're developing their own chips anyway. Alibaba, massive company of China, is developing their own chips. Huawei, the phone, know them for phones, they've developed chips, and I think this might be an unexpected result for the US. What's quite interesting to me over the long term is how this plays out in making AI safer. There was recently a paper released about how 2 alternate futures for how AI can go, because as we've discussed as well, when things go wrong with AI, they can go quite wrong, and there is a path that we can take with this technology where it could end up with a lot of issues. And one of the starting cornerstones of this hypothesis, basically this plans it all the way out for a few years, basically what happens, and one path is the end of the world essentially, and the other path is when we make correct decisions. And this was published from a guy that has very correctly predicted an awful lot of technology trends, so pretty reliable insight into the market. And one of the cornerstone starting positions of this run of events is a divisive relationship between China and the US, competing with each other and therefore making poor decisions to stay ahead of each other. And this causes one thing to lead to another, and eventually it all goes wrong. So it's really interesting. That's sort of the path we're heading down right now. And so I don't know if it's good for AI over the long haul, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about.
See, that is the danger, isn't it? When there is a race and there is a competition and there is that urgency that nation states, I guess, find themselves in. The race to AGI and all the rest of it. So how does that impact things? That whole societal question of what's going to happen when AI can, when a country breaks the AGI and can really steam ahead of every other country, what does it mean for the world? What does it mean for military? What does it mean for work? There's all these sort of unknown sort of questions. And what happens if they can't control the AI? And it starts self-learning and developing itself. Say for example, China or America, it doesn't matter who. They break, this AGI sort of race and suddenly accelerate way beyond everyone else. What happens if they can't control it? Where does that lead? And it all started from a geopolitical stance of competition. The thing is, we can speculate and we can imagine a dystopian future of the Terminators, but the reality is, we literally no one has a bloody clue. Even people who are working in the space, you can have an opinion whether it's dystopian or actually, it's all fear mongering, but it's all speculation. It is all speculation. And I guess the question is, are they putting guardrails in place? I guess to even have guardrails, you need coordination amongst countries, and when countries are competing,
Well, so again, I don't know. I'm not fluent in the entire series of events within this published paper, but I know of I can cherry pick parts of it. And again, right in the beginning, there's this straight away. There's a divisive relationship between the US and China, and there's a lot of espionage going on. With again, because there's this competition. China is still a little bit behind the US in terms of AI. It's catching up very quickly, and arguably it is competitive, but I think it still is a little bit behind. So as a result of that, they're going to be trying to steal trade secrets. They're going to be trying to steal IP from American companies, and this is how it all starts. And in a result of that, the US retaliates by not being transparent about the AI they're developing. They're keeping it behind closed doors. They've got AGI, but they're not telling even the US government. And when the US government finds out, they hide it behind closed doors. And it literally is a series of back and forth events which unfolds, which then causes, AGI to spiral out of control and eventually kill us. So it's.
Yeah, it's wild, for sure. Yeah. No, definitely. Do you think there's any? Could we read into this story in a more of a geopolitical way when it comes to Taiwan? Because obviously, one of the big issues with Taiwan, one of the big, unspoken reasons that they want to, retake Taiwan is because obviously they are one of the centers of chip making.
Of course.
And obviously, and America have since started to go, actually, we're quite exposed here. We need to start bringing that back in-house on the mainland and make sure we're not, not all our chips are being built in Taiwan, where potentially there's a big danger. So do you see this as potentially an early indicator that China is less interested in taking over Taiwan?
Yeah, this is interesting.
Because obviously it's purely sold from from the mainstream media as, China wants it because it's, there was this Chinese communist, internal battle. Was it the 50s? I can't even remember off the top of my head. Let us know in the comments, guys. Fact check me, whatever. But there was this internal revolution, wasn't there, between the communist parties, and a faction sort of split off, and obviously Taiwan and blah blah blah. So without going into that sort of whole historical story, Taiwan was the center of chip making, wasn't it?
Taiwan is fascinating because it's literally right at the center of this AI chip race, like literally right at the center, because both China and the US rely on Taiwan's chips to some degree. There's a company in Taiwan called TSMC, and it makes almost all of the world's advanced chips, everything from iPhones to military systems. And this is the center of it. The US wants to stop China because they don't want, because they have their history with Taiwan, and also they rely on Taiwanese chips. But also then China has an interest there to stop the US because it's a territory very close to China with a big geopolitical interest, and of course there's those there's that desire to stop the US as well. Maybe a major blow to the US not being able to access chips from Taiwan. So I won't pretend to know an awful lot about Taiwan and the history with both the US and China. I know it's at the center of some of this chip race, but it's very common. It just shows. It's what's really fascinating to me mostly is that here we are now. This technology is even hitting geopolitical levels. Where countries are at war over it, in a sense of the word. Battling each other.
Well, it's a hybrid battle, isn't it? Let's be honest.
I was going to say, it's a hybrid, but where the real world is meeting the digital world. But it's all over this technology. That's what's amazing. You don't get this over other things. So, incredibly complicated and incredibly fascinating.
No, absolutely. So I think it's a case of watch this space, see how things unfold, see how this pivot from China relying on American chips evolves. Again, they're obviously building up their capacity and their manufacturing base and their expertise. So that's really, really interesting. So yeah, we'll see. Or whether it's all part of a trade embargo, leveraging, that side of things. So maybe China will lift that restriction once Trump lifts some of his restrictions. We'll see how it plays out. But it's all really sort of fascinating and really shows how technology can impact people's lives in multiple sort of ways. So let's see how this unfolds and watch this space. Listen, guys, if you're still watching, I really appreciate you being here. I should have said this at the beginning. It doesn't cost anything. Give us a like. Really appreciate it. Say hello in the comments. We're friendly guys. Nice to sort of build our community and get to know you. And you can join us as we grow and hopefully get better at presenting and talking a load of hot air. So listen, guys. Yeah, for now we'll say au revoir, and we'll catch you on the next one and keep bringing you the latest news in the AI space.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Take care.
Cheers.